Coming up as the offseason rolls on, we roll back to Friday on a Monday for some fan takes around the draft, free agency, and what to expect from Brooklyn. We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And as we say, technical issues right off the top to let you know, my fault, not Doug's. He's a champion. He was here ready to go. I was not. And so we do not want to miss out on fan takes from last week. So we go ahead and dial him back up here on a Monday, Doug.
Buddy, you never have to take the blame. We could have just we're not playing favorite nations here. Like we could just both go down with the ship. Like if something goes right, if it happens to one of us, it happens to both of us. Right. So like that's just the way it is. But it's funny, like as we hit the off season here. I mean, Nets have been in the off season for seemingly forever. I think what we're already years. Like we're already seeing that like next year, like this is going to be a pretty ground. I know every year you say this. This is going to be a pretty ground shifting year in the NBA. Like, I think we can say that like this offseason, the way the draft shook out the lottery, the way some of these teams are getting bounced out of the playoffs, the Tatum injury, Giannis getting moved almost for sure. Like the NBA is going to be a very different place next year. And we're going to have a new champion because with Denver getting bounced, like OKC, Minnesota, New York. I know the Nets fans don't want to hear this. Knicks or the Pacers. There's going to be a new NBA champion. So we're staring down the barrel of a summer that's going to be, I think, kind of probably awesome. This draft is going to be awesome because I think no one's going to, right up to the last minute, no one's going to have a clue about where some of these guys are going. We could see some trades out of like the 3 and 4 spot, specifically the 3 spot, maybe the 2 spot, like with Giannis. Like there's a lot of moving parts. And I think that like having done this long enough, this kind of like top to bottom league infrastructure being changed just doesn't really happen every year. So I think we're headed into a summer of lots of different stuff happening. And we're going to try to hit on a couple of these little things here today.
It was funny too. Yeah, as we talk about some of the fans that came in with this, I will just say, as we always highlight these, there was a BKN Tweety over on social who asked if we had any room on the train out of town, asking for a friend. When we talk about exiting the show at the end of the month, obviously, and also maybe some of the fan base trying to exit the fan base as this thing continues to go in an interesting direction. But you're right. Like, it'll be interesting to see. We've heard things about the Eastern Conference, and if you think about that next year, and you mentioned Tatum and what's going to happen in Boston and their money situation, that actually falls into the category that some people have brought up about, like, are there potential salary dumps that the Nets could be in the market for? And we'll touch on that in segment number 2. But to start things off, there is this familiar conversation, and it comes from Owen Too Tough over on social. He offers up a couple of trades around the draft. Nicholas Claxton, Cam Johnson, and pick 8 for pick number 2. And then you go ahead and you take Harper, and you also get Bryant at 19. Or you can also trade picks 26 and 27 with whatever else is needed, nondescript, whatever else is needed to move back up to 10 to 15 range, and then trade Claxton and CJ for future picks. You get he goes with Molly Watch at 8. He takes Bryant in the 10 to 15 range. He takes Fleming at 19. How do we feel about that? I think the overarching theme here is like when you leave gaps of and whatever else it takes, then you're creating an empty, a bit of a hollow conversation around whether or not it's achievable and whether or not you'd sign off on it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll save all the Nets fans some of this heartache here. They're not getting Dylan Harper at 2. So everyone can just get that right out of there.
That a lot of people, whatever it takes to get to 2, like you're not getting to 2.
They're not getting there. Giannis might not get the 2. I'm being serious. Right. Like they might not. Like the Spurs might be like they need Dylan Harper to be on Wemby's timeline, and maybe they try to get out of De'Aaron Fox at some point, or like and they do everything else except for 2 to get Giannis. Like you're not getting Cam Johnson's not getting you Dylan Harper. Like I don't care. It just like so. I think Nets fans can do themselves a favor and not pre-deal with the heartache about not having that happen. Now, I do think I think the Nets are somewhat live at 3 if they wanted to go there, because I think Philly is in a totally different spot here where the projects that these Ace or VJ could be compared to what a timeline they might think they're on, like just doesn't line up at all. And so like, especially if you think like, Ace Bailey's a 4-year project or something, which it could be, like they're just not on that timeline. And like VJ Edgecombe might not pair well with Maxey. And it's like, well, that makes that a little bit weird. And so I think there's a world, and the PG contract's a total disaster. I think the world where they maybe use 3 to get out of a mess and maybe try to like upgrade for one more shot around a Hail Mary around the bead. I think that is like a little bit live. So I think it's not likely, but the Athletic came out and said something about it. They might be looking to get out. They could probably use a player like Cam Johnson. Morey is maximalized around probably like championship windows. And if like you're there with Embiid, then that's just where you got to be. I think that one's like somewhat interesting. And usually I take those with a complete grain of salt, but this one I was like, there's probably enough here to think about it. And I still think they probably pick a 3 if I had to choose, or if I had to just bet. But I don't know. Do you find that one at all interesting? Again, Spurs thing off the table. Sixers thing, I think it's possible.
Yeah, that to me is like, as we talked about this with Ace Bailey, with VJ Edgecombe. Okay, we think it's going to be chalk and it's going to be Ace Bailey, but there's like a little bit of a conversation around 4, and we talk about how there's a difference between 1 by itself, then 2, and then 3 and 4, and then 5 and going back, right? So if you're in like Philly's situation, it is what I find fascinating, because they have the Paul George contract and they obviously have Embiid and the injuries and everything else, but also you're still in a window, and something that we'll talk about here in the second segment around the East next year. And we mentioned this last week too. If the East feels like it's pretty open and you're the Philadelphia 76ers and you still do have Joel Embiid, you're as inclined as anyone to say like, okay, how do we make ourselves as strong as possible for the next 2 or 3 years? And then like worry about the reset 2 or 3 years from now. So putting Cam Johnson, as we talked about, on a team that wants to be deep playoff run, wants to be championship contention, that matters. And by the way, if you're the 76ers, here's what I think that one feels intriguing. You're still getting a player at 8 then. Like if this scenario is about the Nets going from 8 to 3 to get Ace Bailey, let's just say, and you're going to give up the 8th pick, Cam Johnson, maybe something else. Well, that means Philadelphia still gets in a very deep draft class a guy, as we talked about last week, could still end up finding a star closer to 10, from 10 to 20, probably going to be a guy or two that ends up hitting in a big way, out punting their draft stock and where they end up actually going. So those moves to me are at least with Philadelphia, more of a conversation than anything else so far we've seen from Nets fans. Whatever percentage chance, since we're doing fan takes, percentage chance
Low.
You think the Nets make a move up the board here to something like that? 3, Philadelphia.
Like 5% chance, something like that. But I mean, like most times I would say 0. So like, because I think that these trades are really rare to happen. So so most times I would say it's a total 0, unless you have a guy like Giannis kind of like in and around the mix. So 5% to me represents like a real number, because again, I just don't think these are all that realistic. There's just too many other pieces. We've said this many times. Like there's just too many other pieces that get associated with these guys. And if you trade out of these spots and the guy becomes a star, good luck. You'll sit with it forever. So, and there's just too much existential risk for stuff like that to happen. So that's why I usually don't want to do it. But the Sixers are just such a weird kind of mini mess here, and just got so lucky. I mean, God, I can't believe they got the 3 pick. Like after just the disgrace of I know we were all rooting for tanking, and then at the same time with the net, when you have Embiid and PG and Maxey and all these other guys, like it's just so stupid to have teams be able to do this. But whatever. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's likely, but it's not 0.
And it's funny too, because we'll move into our next conversation here coming out of the break, but it's funny too to think about Phoenix, not the same kind of thing, but they end up they get Kevin Durant via the trade. And then they also bring in another old body in Beal, and they had some guys there already, but like it didn't work. Like if you're Philadelphia, there's probably a little bit of, buyer beware kind of territory here when it comes to making these sort of moves and holding on to your timeline. Fine. Hold on to your timeline, but overcommit to your timeline, stay flexible with it, move out of it. Like all these things I think are interesting. We look at these this season specifically and the way the landscape of the NBA is going to unfold next year. Coming up here in a second. Hey, maybe we can get some predictions about Eastern and Western Conference Finals, but also the Giannis of it all, because there is discussions that keep bubbling up around that. We'll do it in a little bit more coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Look, you ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, you got the online shopping and entertainment. It's easy to lose track and forget about with things getting expensive these days. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Look, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You're tracking all your accounts, your investments, your spending. It's all in one place. You stop managing your money. You start building that wealth, baby. You get those. You're going to get into Monarch Money. You're going to realize how much maybe you'll be spending on food delivery and be able to budget smarter, save more. You're not going to juggle multiple apps either. And check your finances. You track that spending. You can even plan those long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, a little bit of a throwback to Friday when we didn't get our fan takes in, so now it's Monday, but we're still talking Friday and we're still talking fan takes. And all this conversation, as by the way, so just a very quick aside here. We talk about the NBA playoffs. We haven't been overly concerned about the results of these. Why? Because the Nets aren't in them. And some of these teams have suffered injuries that I think have made it interesting now. When you mentioned the top, Pacers, Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Then on the other side, though, has your confidence waned, depending on where you stood, in the Oklahoma City Thunder and getting to the finals and being the odds-on favorite and having the most wins after going through? It is still the Nuggets. It wasn't like this was a scrub Western Conference team or a plucky Western Conference team. This is a team that won a championship very recently that took you to 7 games. Ultimately, they got past them and made it to the ECF.
No, I feel the same way about them as I felt the beginning, is because I was like, they're really good. The defense is stacked. And what they're going to struggle with maybe is that they just don't have another good scorer outside SGA. And that's kind of been correct. And so they're still winning, and they smoked Denver in this last game, and SGA was awesome. But we've seen Jalen Williams struggle, and we've seen at times, and we've just seen them in the playoffs. You just need a second guy. You need the guy for sure. You need a top 5 player in the league. Basically, is how we're seeing things. Although, I mean, maybe these playoffs are just changing it, because unless you want to say Brunson's a top five player in the league, and wherever you can say Halliburton, I do think there's a flattening a little bit. I mean, injuries have for sure shaken this up. Steph getting hurt, Tatum getting hurt. It's injuries have played a major part. It happens, so it's I would never they're not going to put any asterisks around this. It's just, if Tatum stays healthy, maybe the Knicks maybe they still lose. I don't know. So maybe the team building piece isn't as much of star driven stuff as you just need a fully complete team. And OKC does have crazy depth, right? The Pacers are deep. Yeah. The Knicks just go 6 guys, and that's 6 guys that with no kind of weak links there. And with a true star in Brunson. Anyway, all things considered, my opinion of OKC has not changed. I still think that they need a second scorer, and it might just not be that important anymore. They're at the doorstep. So I don't know. This is a pretty big statement game against Denver. I was joking with my daughter because I was watching the game. She came home. We started talking about something. The game was tied. And then 15 minutes later, I looked up and they were winning by 30. I was like, geez, what happened? I stopped for 5 minutes to talk about something. And through at the end of the first quarter, and then through halftime, and then the beginning of the third quarter, I was like, oh, it's over. They won the game. So I think they're still they're the betting favorite. They should be. They have the best team. They have the best defense, but I don't think it's anything close to a lock, because that's just not how the playoffs are playing out.
Talk about conversation about coaches not mattering. Denver fires their coach at the doorstep of the postseason, and then they almost made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Just
he was good. Adelman was good, man.
Excuse me.
Played a bunch of zone. Zone against OKC, and they threw him off. And I don't know. And then Aaron Gordon kind of had a hamstring issue. No excuses, but it's just he's going to get rehired. So anyway.
I'm very curious to see what happens with them and the Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals as well. Here's a fun one from Dan Leahy, one of our longtime supporters. I like that. I like this sentiment. We kind of saved the league when you think about it. If we wouldn't have traded our pick back this year, it would have 100% spiked to number 1, and Cooper Flagg would be a Houston Rocket. And that is how you go ahead and find the silver lining as things were unraveling for your team.
That one's a total lock. Yeah. And it's another thing. Well, let's just actually, so that one's a total lock. I also think let's just talk about Giannis real quick. How much credence do you put in? Giannis did a mini AMA on Twitter this weekend where people asked him a bunch of questions, and they were like, what's your favorite city to play in? And he's said the same thing every player says, which is at New York, except that obviously that's, and then it was what's your favorite one to visit? And he said all the Florida cities, and he's kind of just hedged his bets about a bunch of different teams out there that he could maybe get his way into. What do you think as it stands now? I think he's for sure getting traded here. I think that one, I feel so confident he's getting traded this summer. Look, are you at all in the Giannis train here with where they are? Because there's a couple other things that Nets fans, if we're talking fan takes, like this has been thrown out here a lot, like with like the sentiment. Some people want it, some people don't want to get rid of the picks. I don't know. Like, where do you stand here with the Giannis? We could probably like do one more take on this and then call it until something official happens. But like, where do you stand here with the Giannis?
No, it is interesting, right? So when we talked last week about how, like, hey, the Eastern Conference, next season, it could end up being, pretty wide open. You think about how the Magic maybe didn't take that next step forward. Detroit's going to be a better team, all that stuff, right? So because it's maybe going to be a weaker Eastern Conference, should the Brooklyn Nets then turn around and pivot and say, okay, let's go after Giannis? I just don't, you acknowledged the ability for the Nets to be able to take on salary, right? They're a little bit more flexible in that regard. They don't have to match, so you can. We talked about Cam Johnson before, talk about Nick Claxton before. You can dump money. Like the Brooklyn Nets can not only add Giannis via trade, then they can also shed additional salary. Not that you would want to necessarily get rid of Cam Johnson, but you can shed another $20+ million to go add maybe another piece that you want to bring in. I still, in spite of falling to the 8th pick, believe the Brooklyn Nets should stay the course, draft at 8, see what 19, all these picks you're going to have, and the next year as well. But you said 5%, in that first about having a problem. I'll say like there is a part of me, 15% chance that the Nets could make the trade for Giannis and also add another piece and actually make themselves one of the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference going into next year immediately through this draft this offseason. And that means something. Like that does mean something if you think you put yourself in that echelon immediately, and you probably would feel good going up against the Knicks next year, going up against the Pacers next year, right? We'll see what happens with Boston. Detroit's going to be there. Like, you'd feel good having Giannis and Star to be named later in the Eastern Conference landscape to be competing for an Eastern Conference Finals probably next season.
If they had like one more guy, I'd be in on this.
I know that's what it is. I know.
Like they just they just don't have the guy. Like they just don't have the guy. Like, and people say you have Cam Thomas. I just don't think you have enough proof that that's the case. Even if you're like super pro Cam Thomas, I just think there's not enough of a case to be made that like he's a number 2 guy on an Eastern Conference semifinals team or something like that. Like we just haven't seen it. And so, and look, might be late to this party. I'm not really sure. It's just the timelines are all screwed up. You can't play him with Claxton, so you'd have to do like one other move, right? And so there's just like other things that would have to happen. They're going to get completely saved. That there's going to be a huge market for him. Like that's going to save the Nets. That the Rockets, the Spurs, maybe Detroit kind of tips their hand in here because they saw something from Cade, and you're like, hey, Cade plus Giannis could work. Like there's enough things here that there's enough other teams here that are going to make really compelling cases and have more to give in terms of like the young player category, which the Nets do not have, that they're going to get saved, I think, for themselves and not be able to do it. That's where I stand up. I'm fully on that one.
Coming up here in a second, let's have some fun, right? Let's pose a little something for Doug. He won't appreciate it. We're all going to love it. We'll talk about a potential trade to get Giannis and that other star player in Brooklyn to vault him right back into the conversation to be a championship contender. We'll do that and so much more in just one moment.
Is it Jokic?
As we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, spoiler alert: trade for Luka, trade for the Joker, and call it a day. No, but we're going to talk a little bit about social media too here, and about one Kevin Durant, and that's how you tie it all together. In a world, if you were the Brooklyn Nets and it was like, hey, you get all the first round picks this year for Giannis, right? And then you say, we'll give you a bunch of our first round picks next year for Kevin Durant, who wants out. And you're just staring down the barrel of the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant back in the black and white, Giannis now on that team. As unrealistic and impossible and not likely, and it's never going to happen as it is, if right now Phoenix was on the phone and so was Milwaukee, and that was the thing, hey, 10 first-round picks, you end up with both these dudes back in Brooklyn, you'd sign up for that in a heartbeat, and you'd never look back.
Yeah, I would do that. I would do that. Yeah, I mean, like, at that point, like, whatever, you have no F's to give anyway. And so right. It's like, I don't know, like, could those two guys, if they stayed healthy for the whole run, I think it's going to be super unlikely. Could those two guys be the backbone of a championship team? I think they wouldn't be favorites or anything, but I don't know, be fun. And so, yeah, I'd probably do it. It's so unrealistic. And I know you're kind of kidding, but it is one of those things. It's like the NBA, you have to be deep, but you still do have to have like some of the best players. And if those are the ways to get the best players,
I'm out of the stars until you paint a picture where I could have some really good stuff.
It would feel very much like the guy who keeps rolling his car lease into the next car lease, and the time you finally pay for it is on the last one or something like that. It's like it gets a little worse every time, and then finally you just hit the brick wall, and like you're thinking about driving the car off a cliff to try to recoup it or something like that. Like it feels like that kind of story. But yeah, anyway, let's get into the KD thing. So.
Of course.
Gotta love a good NBA beef. I mean, thank goodness for Twitter. I'll say something about Twitter.
About it.
The world is so flat. It's really everywhere, but Twitter is a great example. The world is so flat now where you can just interact with people, especially if they're willing to do it. And I'm not thinking like, NBA players aren't like higher stations, like morally, ethically or anything like that, but like they for sure like are on a fame level higher than a lot of the people. And you just don't need to interact with everyone. And, but KD, one, is happy to. And two, it's just a world where it's just like, it's Elon Musk put it perfectly when he said, Twitter is basically just a group chat at scale, right? And we're seeing like, that's what it is. It's like, it's just the group chat, except that everyone's there. And sometimes someone weighs in, because we saw over the weekend that our boy Anthony Puccio from Nets Daily, Pooch, made a tweet. I'm just going to read this.
Okay.
This is so good. The best thing that ever happened for the Knicks was KD and Kyrie choosing Brooklyn. It took time, but they were forced to restructure and build out organically. Now, I think Puccio is heart and head are completely in the right place. He's like one of the good ones on when it comes to like media. I think it's sincere. He's not a clickbaity guy. Like just likes basketball. I'm caveating all this to say, I think this was like an earnest tweet that probably ended up wrapping KD and Kyrie into it. But I think it made sense because like the Knicks could have like been in a play to get those guys, and it came out.
Right.
And then KD, and then the thing that happens that we all want to happen is KD response. KD gets in there.
The door. Oh, look, it's Kevin Durant.
Well, because he's one of the few guys that will get down in the muck and the mire. Like he's just like, fine. He's like, if we gotta dig our hands down here, like we're gonna do it. Because he writes, I don't think the Knicks' success has anything to do with me or Kyrie. An organic NBA team. What does that even mean in professional sports? And then I'm not gonna read the whole tweet thread, but the Pooch's next tweet just goes, "Oh brother," and then he gets into it. And then KD just spent all weekend with Nets fans. Yeah. Like some were piling on Pooch. There's nothing to be taken from this, and we've been guilty of relitigating like the net stuff because that's just like what happens. Like you just do a podcast for a lot of years, and there's sometimes you just like, hey, this is what you're going to talk about. Like they made a championship run, it didn't work out, toe on the line, blah 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 blah. I do think one, this is like a total nothing, but two, I like the world where everyone can just like discuss this stuff in like something of an open forum. Now, I think the people that come in like lob stuff in from the sidelines is not that earnest, and people have their own agendas. But I just find that this, I'm not sure it's good or bad, but it's certainly different. And I was all here for, I was like, oh, nice. Like we're going to get two guys kind of arguing out. No, but by the way, nobody wins in this. But I don't know. Your thoughts on any of it here? I have a couple like parting thoughts on it, but I just find it interesting that we're in a world where it's KD's like, let's get into it, and everyone can like join in the discourse, such as it were.
Yeah, no athletes had ever been this accessible. Now it's their choice, Kevin Durant's choice to engage with it, but you couldn't, in the 90s, you weren't adding Michael Jordan on a platform of some kind and being like, hey, way to sink that J, or you're not as good as Kareem, whatever the comment may have been. And that, by the way, the one thing I'll give, so I'll put in Kevin Durant's corner, is I know that it's a different personality type, but for some reason in my mind, if Twitter existed when Michael Jordan was in his prime, I feel like he would approach that platform a little bit the same way KD does. Like, oh yeah, I could beat you in basketball, and I'll beat you in a social media beef war of some kind. Now, he might be a little bit better at executing it, but I think it's good. I think it's great. I wish that more players did engage with it. The problem is that few and far between. Kevin Durant is a rare breed who will engage with all this stuff and not care at all, about the cycle of it. Like he seems to really enjoy it. Other guys, though, can't risk it, right? Whether, mentality wise or getting overexposed around something, whatever it may be. So I think most guys guard their social personality, whereas Kevin Durant's like, hey, man, I hoop and I F with people on Twitter. That's kind of my two favorite things to do. I wish that there was more of it. And I wish, I will say, and I've seen, so one last thing, I will say that in other circumstances, I've seen Kevin Durant give credit to fans or credit to media members that have had a good take or have come across something positively. So it's a two-way street. Kevin Durant will torch dudes if he thinks they're wrong or it's a bad take. And he also does give the credit out to fans and John Q public. So that part of it, I think, is also good from an interaction standpoint with people that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, reach in any way.
Yeah, no, I think so. I totally agree with all that. And most of the times you don't see athletes do this because it's really only for them downside. Like there's no upside at all to it. Like there's simply there's not a single shred of upside to getting into doing this because one, as we've seen many times from social media, you are not engaged in some kind of intellectual discourse where everyone is like, great point. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's those aren't things that you typically hear. So really it's frankly just not even worth it. And so, but at the same time, I like the part where if you feel like, to defend KD on this one, it's like, well, why did I get dragged into this? Like the Knicks run is the Knicks run. Puccio has a big following. He's one of the premier Nets voices maybe the guy, right? Like in the Nets space. Now that they're kind of the national media is kind of long since forgotten Brooklyn. I mean, there's only a few sort of earnest media members that are talking about the Nets on a daily basis, even in New York, by the way, rightfully so. There's not a ton of names here. And he might say, well, what do we have to do with this? The Knicks give the credit where the Knicks are due. And I don't need to keep getting dragged through the history of Brooklyn. It is what it is. I want it. And he said later, he's like, and they know each other. They've met, these aren't just online strangers. They know each other. He's like, I wanted this to turn out a different way. So I can see Katie's point on that one. But at the same time, it's you also, if you read Pooch's kind of stuff, it's he doesn't really have an agenda either. I think there's been media members. I'm not going to say these people. You and I have seen it. There have been media members that have come through, especially with the KD Kyrie era, that had agendas for sure.
Yep.
They had agendas. Yep. And it was I'm not going to say this. There's one guy in particular who clearly had an agenda, and it was his time to cook, and he just wanted to drum up some headlines, and he was like, it's my turn now, and I think that he was not an honest reporter when it came to the Nets.
Yep.
I think everyone would agree with me, and except for him. And Pooch is just but who cares? So I don't care. But Pooch is not that guy either. He's a guy that loves the Nets. He's been with them for basically since I'm pretty sure he was a teenager. And he's just kind of a guy who embodies this idea about I want to report on this team and I just want to talk basketball and this is it. So I think from that standpoint, I've kind of always side with him because I think it's I find him to be, I've used the word earnest a lot, but an earnest reporter of things that aren't clickbaity. And sometimes it's not the way to get all the way ahead in the reporting world, but you can at least keep your integrity intact. And I think he's definitely has done that through the years. So I think it was kind of just maybe got caught up a little bit and trying to make a point about something. And then it got maybe twisted in a way that he didn't find to be the case.
By the way, I've never seen Twitter ever have something twist and, get away from you in a way that you didn't intend where you can no longer control the narrative. I am crafting, just to be clear here, Fan Take Friday, good stuff will be in all week. We all know the deal. We got a lot of conversation to have, including heading back into the later picks in the first round and where Brooklyn can maybe make some hay with their roster. But I'm thinking, I may just push post on the, hey, Kevin Durant and Giannis, why not make plans to meet up at the corner of Atlantic and Flatbush and hoop next season? That kind of feels like the least clickbaity thing that I could do on a Monday morning, just to see what happens. Let's just
talk about honest. Yeah, just talk about honest tweeting. That's just a good, honest idea. And if it got a little engagement, oh my
God. If it got a little engagement, that wasn't even what I came here for.
Yeah, it was the way my wife and I say around the house, not my fault. And whenever something happens around this house,
wasn't me.
Doesn't matter who did it or who's not my fault. That's all I have to say. All right. Good stuff. We're going to get out of here. Look, the rest of this week, we're going to spend more on the draft. We promise we're going to get later into some of these picks. We've spent a lot of time around the top 15. Although I will say, after we did that, the Demon episode and the Carter Bryant, Like literally, like right after we posted that, those guys went into the combine and absolutely cooked. And like both of them, and that was a podcast where we both said these are good examples of where someone in this podcast, someone in this draft, in this range
is about to go off.
It's all about us. I hate to bring it back to us here, but just for 1 second, I'll bring it back to us. No, right after that podcast, that was where we were like, hey, someone in this like 15, 16 range is going to be a star. It's like a little hard to tell who it is because some of these guys have bust potential in them too, but they have star potential. And then right after that, these guys just tore up the combine, and it seems like really both improve their draft stock. So we'll talk about a few of these other guys that are in that range, like Senge, and then a couple other guys, and then we'll get a little. We'll pile on a bunch of guys near the end that like we're really really interested in, like the 20s, because the Nets have a lot of picks there. So plenty of draft stuff coming this week. Got to take a deep breath. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe wherever you listen. It's totally free. Number one way to help the show, because the show's going to be going on after Adam and I are off. There's Locked On Nets is going to keep chugging along. So you got to make sure you subscribe wherever you listen. Like
a little train. The tweet's out there, buddy. It's live. Let the cards fall where they may. Let the superstars play basketball where they want. That's what I'm about. And frankly, I don't have any reason not to be concerned. I'll be exiting end of the month. By the way, though, just to be clear, I have never tried to buffer myself. I like rolling the dice. And that is one Kevin Costner.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.